Before we get into anything Warhammer related, can I just say how stupid the removal of dislike counters on this platform is? The big change finally went through for me this evening, and it's trash. It's trash. YouTube already has massive issues with disinformation and echo chambers developing in this corner of the internet, where only one type of thought is allowed. Now, I don't always agree with you guys. In fact, many of you will have seen comments from me arguing with people in the past, and if you know me well, you know I don't have a problem engaging with someone who I think is incorrect. I will tell you why I think you're wrong, and I will explain why afterwards. But that's what comments and the like and dislike system are there for. You don't have to agree with everything I say, or every point I make, and if for some reason you think a video is poor quality or wrong, you can share that opinion by leaving a dislike. And if you leave a comment, I may respond to it, I may disagree with you, but we can have a discussion about it. Part of that is gone now. If you dislike my video, people won't see it. The system was far from a perfect one, and just because a video has a bunch of dislikes doesn't mean the creator's wrong or that they did a bad job on the video. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's just a very divisive topic. But the only possible way to interpret the removal of this dislike counter is a bunch of media conglomerates and gigantic companies banding together and pushing for even more power where they advertise. This is not a change to benefit small content creators. It has nothing to do with bullying, regardless of what YouTube said. It's about removing another element of your voice, so that if corporations do something shitty, it's more difficult for people to grasp the situation and see what's wrong. If a video has 1K likes and 100,000 dislikes, you know something's wrong there, you're gonna dive into it, you're gonna be more informed on the topic. This right here is about big, multi-billion-dollar businesses trying to shape the narrative even more than they already do, and it's gross. And the higher-ups at YouTube should be ashamed that they pushed for its implementation. Incredibly out of touch, and a sad day for this platform. I hope it gets changed back one day. Now, stepping off the soapbox onto Warhammer 3, where we've been tricked, hoodwinked, and quite possibly bamboozled. They pulled a sneaky one on us, and before the Enter the World trailer has even hit, we're taking a look at the full Nurgle unit roster, from concept art to design and mechanics for every filthy little freak crawling its way out of the Plaguefather's favorite garden. Also, in a somewhat unique twist, we have Kugath Plaguefather stats, so that's where we shall begin, with the Fetid Brewmaster's combat statistics. The Jolly Green Giant has almost 15,000 HP, which may be on Ultra unit size, but no matter how you slice it, that value is ginormous. For comparison, a War Mammoth has 14,144 health on Ultra, and doesn't have access to any healing whatsoever, or casting, or combat performance like this. Naturally, gonna be super slow at 28 speed and a huge hitbox right for focused missile fire, but 70 armor is higher than I was expecting. He hits like a Mack truck, and he's also Warhammer 3's earliest artillery piece, able to throw exploding Nurglings across the battlefield and also summon them to his side. Not to mention he's riding a teeming mass of Nurglings atop a throne of stink, spreading majestic maladies to the far corners of the world. He is a beautiful creature, and if anything happens to him, I'll kill everyone in this room, and then myself. By the way, he also costs 3,800 Warhammer bucks or more, so he's coming in at the same price as Manfred von Karstein, and both of his lores combined on a zombie dragon, more than Malekith on Seraphon, more than pretty much any other character in the setting. So yeah, almost 4,000 funds to bring him, fully kitted out of course, you can cut some of those spells, but yeah, that's pretty insane. So the named Greater Demons continue to impress here, and they're simply on a different power scale compared to the starting lords from Game 1 and Game 2. Terrifying and kind of adorable. So let's take a look at the full roster here and see what's cooking in Nurgle's smelly kitchen. And the answer is a relatively small meal, very similar to Tzeentch's in size, with a lot of flavor, and some exciting and unexpected additions to round it out. For generic lords, we have the Herald of Nurgle that can ride a Palanquin or Rotfly, and an Exalted Great Unclean One. Both can bring either the Lore of Death or the Lore of Nurgle. For heroes, we have a Cultist who can ride a Chaos Steed, and the Plague Ridden that can ride a Palanquin or Rotfly and bring the Lore of Death or Nurgle. For infantry, we have Nurglings, Plague Bearers, Exalted Plague Bearers, and Forsaken. And for monsters and beasts, Chaos Furies, Beasts of Nurgle, Plague Toads, Rotflies, Pox Riders, Spawn of Nurgle, Plague Drones of Nurgle, the Flying War Beast generic variant, and the Death's Head variant, and the Great Unclean One, rounded out by the Soul Grinder with Phlegm Bombardment. Now you'll notice almost immediately that Mortal Warriors of Chaos units are pretty much entirely absent here. There are no Chosen, there are no Chaos Warriors, there are no Marauders or anything of the sort. At the moment, this is a demon roster almost entirely, even more heavily focused on that side than Khorne and Tzeentch were. But if we combine that information with that first generic Lord choice, the Herald of Nurgle, then we can already dive into our crystal ball and divine the immediate future for the Plaguefather, because this is the best evidence yet that marked mortals of each god are going to be in almost immediate pursuit in the first Lord packs after launch. If you harken back to my Lore Army and Tactics video for this faction, we covered Epidemius, the Tallyman, the Plague God's most esteemed herald, who was a hero in the Demons of Chaos 8th edition army book, similar to Uzul Skulltaker, the Blue Scribes, and the Mask of Slaanesh. Epidemius is a herald of Nurgle, riding a palanquin throne. His toes are completely and utterly stepped on by the existence of unnamed generic heralds of Nurgle riding palanquin thrones that will already be in the game on day one, because it's in this army list. So, this almost certainly moves characters like the Mask of Slaanesh and Epidemius into free LC slots, while Mortal Champions make up the first DLCs. And that means Festus the Leech Lord is quite likely to be the next Lord after Kugath Plaguefather, and that's when Chosen with Plague Thighs and better-looking Chaos Warriors for all the 4 factions will likely make their debuts as well. I don't think we'll have to wait very long to see the Mortal side get touched up, but of course, lots of us would have liked to have seen it on day one. So for us dozens of Warriors of Chaos fans, I get the frustration, I'm with you. I also would have liked to see Mortals here, and I've talked about that at length, but this is the full demonic roster for Nurgle, and there's some really cool extra toys from Forge World and other sources as a cherry on top. Nurgle Lords are of course falling into the Herald and Exalted Great Demon categories, just like the other 2 Chaos Gods revealed thus far. And the Herald is a jovial, hardy, and immensely powerful demon wielding the lore of Nurgle or the lore of death. Just like Tzeentch gets metal and Slaanesh gets shadows, Nurgle gets death in 8th edition, and so it is here as well. It can mount up on a palanquin throne for presumably more armor, HP, and AoE passives, or you can grab a Rotfly and zoom around the battlefield with a speedy, monstrous mount and a lot of mass. I think the Rotfly will make him an overall more dangerous opponent than the palanquin throne will, because speed is an element that Nurgle lacks, and flying monstrous casters happen to be extremely good, especially in campaign. The other choice, of course, is the Exalted Great Unclean One, and the rare monster version that will serve as his premier single-entity demons. These are amongst the most resilient and foul creatures in all of Warhammer Fantasy, crushing everything in their path and spreading rot and spells and nurglings from their buttholes. They will be a wonderful test for whether anything regarding focus fire from archers and handguns has actually changed in Warhammer 3. Because even though Waywatchers and Sisters of Avalorn and Starfire Shafts should obviously put the hurt on them bad, these are not creatures that should be falling quickly to tier 1 Gobos or High Elf archers. There needs to be some thought put into rebalancing range play so that it's still effective, but not quite so oppressive and not so capable of utterly deleting important units from the game before they can do anything. The Exalted Lord version can choose from the lore of Death or Nurgle, and regular Great Unclean Ones will have access to various spells from the lore of Nurgle as well. But before I get to the heroes, I want to talk about that Soul Grinder, or should we say, the Plague Hulk, which will not be its official name here, but it's clearly where it drew inspiration from, and I'm really happy with how the devs decided to tackle these creatures across the board. Again, I get why some people feel they don't fit, and slightly more organic legs might have hit the perfect middle ground here, but that demon is horrific. It's grotesque, and it is a gorgeous representation of all things Nurgle. I'm actually blown away by that model. That's actually horrifying to look at. Exquisite detail all around. And of course, it's armed with a Phlegm Bombardment cannon for vomiting gobs of poisonous ichor into enemy formations and utterly destroying them from across the battlefield. So it can wade into melee, it'll be really tanky and probably the most survivable of all the variants, and it can shoot you from downtown, so probably going to be an extremely powerful single entity monster. Onto the hero portion of the roster, the Cultist of Nurgle is not a caster this time, so unlike the Tzeentch Cultist, he'll be more of a melee specialist. I'm not sure we should expect anything crazy from his combat stats. He essentially looks like a flagellant with lesions all across his body. He's pretty disgusting to look at here. I imagine his auras and support abilities will be somewhat potent, but the description states he's better served on the campaign map as an agent, so you probably won't use him in battle all that often. which stands in stark contrast to the Plague Ridden, which is a smaller, slightly less powerful version of a Herald, also riding either a Palanquin Throne or a Rotfly, wielding Nurgle or Death. Going to be a nice way to bolster your forces in the hero slot. But now we come to infantry, and there's some devilish stuff brewing on that front. There are currently some rumors floating around that Nurglings do indeed form Voltron in melee and bust out some wild animations when they're charging into combat. So the craziness shown in the trailer wasn't just artistic license. I mean, if you go back and watch the shenanigans they bust out in that trailer, the swarming they do is quite unlike anything we've seen in Total War before. So I'm very excited to see how all that translates in-game. By the way, all Nurgle demons share the Poison Attack and Cloud of Flies traits, which increase their melee defense and survivability the longer they fight in extended melee. Plague Bearers of Nurgle are their father's lesser demons, the frontline rank and file of his legions, crafted by those souls thrice damned by the rot. If they lack in armor and skill, they make up for in pure strength and health, representing a slow, plodding wall of death. They'll be your frontline for the early game, and Forsaken of Nurgle will be your flankers. Not particularly interesting at this point, except they are essentially your only infantry fast mover, so they give you some additional flexibility outside the traditional Nurgle archetypes, focused a bit more on attack, flanking, maneuverability, and less on just embracing the pure grind. Exalted Plague Bearers are super cool though. They're essentially to regular Plague Bearers what Chosen are to Chaos Warriors. Only this time, instead of just being bigger, stronger, and more powerful, they also have a precursor ranged attack, which are essentially biological grenades known as Death's Heads that pierce armor, spread poison, and weaken the speed and output of opposing forces. They're going to be super good, likely the go-to frontliner in mid-game for Nurgle, and viable into late game as well. Chaos Furies are kind of boring. They have poison, and they're fast, so useful for hunting down ranged troops, which is not this faction's forte. I'd say this is the one Chaos roster that will benefit from them the most, but every Chaos faction has them, so meh. But the Beast of Nurgle is a big, bumbling, lovable buffoon, and will dive much more deeply into the life cycle of both this creature and its metamorphosis into a Rotfly in a video I'm working on with Invicta that will hopefully hit this channel before Christmas. The Skyfleet episode for Cathay I wrote should be up on his channel within the next week or week and a half, and then Plague Drones will be the next unit spotlight on mine, again hopefully before Christmas. So these beasts are regenerating puppies who just want to lick you and love you, and no, not the damage they cause, slowly and corrosively melting anything they come in contact with. Essentially the only demon in Warhammer that is not malicious, hateful, or outright evil. The Plague Toads of Nurgle are the super special edition though, and rightfully, I don't think many people were expecting this to be a launch day unit. A lot of people thought they'd come with Tamarkan because that's where they first came out in any army book, in the 7th edition army book with the Chaos Dwarfs and Tamarkan, Throne of Chaos. They are powerful war beasts, filling a similar role to Fleshhounds of Khorne or Saber Tusk Pack, but using their anti-infantry properties and poison combined with their hellish mass to batter their way through opponents. Tons of mass, tons of killing power, not particularly survivable compared to some other Nurgle units though. They're joined by the Pox Riders, melting Plague Bear and Toad into monstrous cavalry, spraying necrotic filth and brackish blood throughout an enemy's ranks, and of course, those Plague Bearers, who are quite well known for their ability to survive, should raise the melee defense and general melee stats of those Toads and turn them into true monstrous cav. Don't expect them to be on the level of Skull Crushers or Blood Crushers, but still a potent force, adding some much needed impact damage, charge bonus, and maneuverability as well. Rotflies and their variants are the unit that is most interesting for me though, and that's why Invicta and I will be covering them very much in depth in a Units of History quote-unquote video for Warhammer. Their lore is incredibly interesting, but for now, suffice to say that when a Beast of Nurgle is spurned enough times, a malevolent canker begins to form in their soul and a terrifying transformation begins to take place. What bursts forth is a fast-moving, armor-piercing flying creature filled with malice, one that can toggle that flying button for more impactful charges, skittering along the ground. But when these Rotflies are mounted by high-ranking Plague Bearers, they become Plague Drones, the premier monstrous cavalry in the realm of the Rotfather, and they have the mass and killing power to break through just about anything. And they're flying monstrous cav, which is not a common unit archetype in Mortal Empires at all. The Death's Head variant will be able to soften up an opponent's battle line with biological grenades before charging home, and there's just so much versatility in this really grotesque package. They've long been one of my favorite Warhammer Fantasy Battle units, and I can't wait to show you guys what we have in store for them. Finally, we have Spawn of Nurgle, which deal poison damage and regenerate with a larger HP pool than other variants, which might make them the most effective of the Chaos Spawn bunch, although they'll lack Frenzy and Tzeentch's Barrier Shield for cycle charging. So that is how the Nurgle roster is shaping up. Let me know what you guys think, what the highlights for you are, and what your biggest disappointments are as well. And let's do some theory crafting on what the roster will need moving forward and which characters and special troop choices should take top priority in free LC and DLC slots. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.